Good morning and welcome to the Leadership in Insurance podcast. I'm your host, Alex Bond, and I'm very lucky to be joined today by Adrien from Zartec. Adrien, how are you?
I'm very good, Alex. Good morning to you.
Yeah, good morning. Good morning. It's not morning where you are. We were just talking, and I suddenly realised I didn't check in about what time you're calling me from, and because you're in Singapore, is that right?
Yeah, no, we're based in Hong Kong.
Oh, Hong Kong.
And you're right, it's actually 5 p.m. So maybe more tea time than coffee time for me.
Yeah, no, good. I've got an embarrassing story to tell about the first time we spoke, but I think I covered it off. But that's not one for the podcast. But that's probably why I can't remember where you're based. So I apologise. But look, no, thanks for joining me. Zartec's fascinating for me. We were talking just before. So I think in some respects it's the biggest insurtech some people haven't heard of. Obviously, did a large raise quite recently. So rather than me stumble over the Zartec business, perhaps you'd introduce what you guys do and what the goal of the business is.
Sure, very happy to do that. So it's indeed, I think, probably first time for many people to hear about Zartec or Zartec. For the simple reason that we have been, and we are going to continue to be, a very low-key company, very little investing in marketing. But actually, I believe what we're doing is pretty inspiring. And I believe it comes from the DNA where our founding companies come from. So if I put it in a few sentences, Zartec was born 3 years ago in 2018 and incubated by two of the very well-known companies in the industry, which is on one hand ZhongAn, the largest insurtech company on earth, digital native, B2B2C ecosystem, embedded insurance play. And on the other end, Softbank, and especially the Vision Fund, which I believe at least 3 years ago was the biggest PE fund in the world as well. And the two of them basically came together with a vision that technology enablement was one of the biggest levers to truly deliver around embedded finance between internet consumer-facing platforms and the broader insurance industry. And this is very much what we've been focusing on over the last 3 years, and I think nicely expanding and growing now to what I would call a scale-up business.
Yeah, a scale-up business indeed. Thank you for that. I think it's really fascinating those two parent companies, because I think Softbank particularly it's been really unfortunate because it gets a lot more press probably in the public eye about a sort of maybe unwise investment decision around a certain workplace environment than it does for all the really amazing stuff and really brilliant investments it's done. I heard I was listening to 20 Minute VC and I think it's one of the lead investment partners from Softbank was on there, and fascinating what they're doing, particularly in like Latin America as well. Some of the investments they're making there, but ZhongAn as well. Yeah, that's I think the depth of that's really interesting. So you're an insurtech born of an insurtech, which I don't know what that makes. There should be a term for that, I think. So their offering is a neo insurer, as we'd normally call it now. And I wanted to talk to you about having that heritage, having that kind of background, that kind of insurtech from an insurtech. What do you think that kind of does for you as a kind of platform of innovation, having that kind of background? How does that impact you on a sort of day-to-day existence?
These are all very, very, very key points. I think, maybe the way, just double clicking on your previous question, I would call it actually a spin-off business. When you actually, see the potential in a new market, decide to create, the right capabilities with people, with investment around it, and understand that if you want this business to strive, it needs to be independent. It needs to be separated. And when we look at the track record of regulated businesses like our parent company, ZhongAn, innovating so much, bringing so much value in the market, but always being limited as an insurance company, so that it means you can't really work with your competitors, other insurance companies. If you want to still bring value in the markets, you have to spin out a business so that it runs independently and can create value. And we've done that on the China core business several times, spinning out very successful businesses, even going to IPO. And that's a bit the vision for ZhongAn as well, right? Because we see that clearly, as you pointed out, it's difficult to envisage working with an insurance company that some markets might be competing with you, while still seeing the value and benefiting from the technology enablements and the know-how this tech arm could be offering. And for us, it is quite easy to draw the line, right? I mean, we operate under Greater China, under this licensed business, and I could also explain in Hong Kong some of the amazing things we do, especially about digital banking. But we believe if we draw the line very clearly, there's no space for hesitations, right? ZhongAn is the global arm in order to deliver technology enablement, and we're doing it already in dozens of markets quite successfully. If you allow, actually, there's a reason why we've been organized this way, because in the many years, even before I joined, but also after I joined in 2018, we've had visitors from all over the world willing to learn about ecosystem business models. That was before embedded insurance became mainstream. After any single meeting, 1 hour, you got a group CEO, you get Asia, Europe CEO coming in and say, wow, but I came to learn about your model, but now I want to work with you. How do we make it happen? And this is how, from a concept level, ZhongAn got created, and how much, powerful partner you can imagine as a Softbank when you have the right vision, you have the right team to execute, and sometimes you need more funding. You need access to partners in order to deliver on that vision. So I think it's really an exciting marriage, and I believe we, on a very fast track to deliver on that vision.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by it, because something that's been discussed on this podcast, and by discussed, I mean, I keep making this really lazy analogy, but I don't see why it can't work this way. So I said for a long time, so if you look at Amazon as a business, and I know Amazon's such an amazing case study that it's kind of almost lazy to think of to use it, but it makes a really interesting point in that, Amazon is effectively was a retailer, and that's where they started, but their knowledge of what was required to deliver systems, online ecosystems for kind of sales, is obviously what spun out into kind of the AWS and all these other aspects. And I've for a long time said, why can't an insurance company do the same thing? Insurance companies know more about systems for insurance than anybody else, and the technology that it drives it. And that's what I find fascinating about Zartec. And like, effectively, that's how I see it. I don't know if that's kind of reflects well on what you think, but I think that's how I see it. Who better? But does, one thing I wanted to talk about is the potential kind of conflicts of interest, and how do you avoid that, or how do you tackle that conversation? Because it's clear that you've already answered it, saying there's a very distinct line between one business and another, but does that come up in conversation? How do you guys tackle that and reassure people?
Yeah, so it happens from time to time. I would say similarly to what you said about AWS being a spin-out business from initially Amazon needs. And actually, it's funny you said that, because in one client meeting 6 months ago, someone said, oh, but actually, this is what you are, right? And so it's very, very spot on. It happens from time to time, but the answer usually is to say, yes, if you operate in China market, our mothership, our parent company, is somehow a competitor of yours. Yeah. But on the other end, it is very much reducing the value, the perception of what we are. And also, in this context of digital businesses, boundaries are not as clear as was the way they've been established 20 or 30 years ago in the industry. If I pick up an example, right, we saw the value of being consumer first in the way designing our business, digital first, technology first. And we managed to build a fantastic platform. When we had a chance to come into Hong Kong market, very mature, very, very, financially savvy, with one of the highest penetration rate of insurance and financial services globally. A lot of people were saying, virtual banks will come to the market, but will never be able to succeed. We were not having any background on financial services by banking point of view. And we still managed to get one of the 8 licenses granted by the regulator, the banking regulator. And we managed to launch with months ahead of the second best or quickest company. And 18 months down the road, we are 2.5 times bigger than the second best follower.
Wow.
And all the other players in the market have a very strong background on banking. You know, I'm talking about Standard Chartered, I'm talking about Ant Financial, I'm talking about Bank of China. So in a way, you need to know why coming to us brings you very strong differentiated value. Because we know so well the know-how in succeeding in digital, creating excitement, engagement, crafting proposition that people love is definitely overarching the value of a potential remote risks of some form of competition in one market.
That's fascinating. Well, I've got to dig into that. Like what's in the secret sauce? Like, because that's phenomenal. It's sort of 18 months, you're 2.5 times bigger than the nearest competitor. And as you're pointing out, these aren't people that, they're not people that don't know what they're doing. Is there something in, because even those names you're mentioning, particularly in banking, that's kind of, you put them in sort of more the legacy class. Is that it? You don't have those hang-ups on, oh, this is the way we've always done it, or what is it? Is it leanness of the business? Or...
Yeah, so there's a secret sauce. I'm not going to be fully disclosing today, but it comes down to a couple of key points, right? So when you build something digital native, you have no limits into what you want to be delivering in the market. I think this is really a space where traditional well-established players can't play. If you look at banking, you will be talking about operating branches and what you want to be offering. If we go back to insurance, it is what we call channel conflicts. And this is sometimes the biggest challenge for well-established organizations that want to be going digital. They know this is where the market and the consumers are heading. They just don't know how to deliver it and make it right. So by building a bank in Hong Kong, a life insurance company in Hong Kong, to us, it's really about showcasing that in a well-established market, we have the right ways to actually scale, grow profitably, successfully a business, with a toolkit from digital. And last but not least, obviously, people is absolutely key in delivering it. You have to find the right seeds, people that have the right market knowledge, the industry domain knowledge, and have a vision about where to bring the industry next. And another point, I'm sure you will be coming to that at one point in time today, regulation, right? Because when you are the first one innovating in the market, it also means you are the first one to be able to convince the regulator to do this. Why, if you're the first one, it's always the most difficult to go, right? It's always easier to be a fast follower. And I believe if you are nailing these elements properly, technology, vision, people, regulation, that's how you deliver. That's how you optimize your proposition and go big in the market.
Yeah, there's so much in there that I want to pick up, and you're right. I did want to talk about regulation. I'll jump to that a bit later. I think obviously talent's my sort of bag, and that's where I kind of play, but particularly in that kind of startup scale up environment, because what I'm fascinated about, and you and I have obviously sort of spoken in the past about these sorts of things, is what defines the kind of people that are right for you. How do you kind of, because how do you find those people that are right for the speed of business that that startup scale up environment, that startup scale up mentality? How do you do it? Because I'm fascinated about asking other people, because for me it's where the kind of science and art of recruitment kind of meet in the middle, because there is a bit of a sense and feel, and there are ways of being more robust about it, but there is definitely a thing about personality types. So I suppose there's sort of two parts to that: defining who works well in that environment, but secondly, how do you go about finding those people out for you?
Maybe the best way to illustrate is just to share my own story, which I think is quite unique. in joining ZhongAn very early on. So 2018, the company was just becoming incorporated. I think it's first about the people in the industry, and I got lucky enough to get to know the team at ZhongAn actually 18 months before I joined, and having a chance to interact, to actually get to truly deeply understand the depth of the business model and the vision of the leadership, eventually made me fall in love with that model, right? And back in the days, again, it was ecosystem business model. There was a bit this shady thing about micro insurance policies, right? Nobody was truly getting it. I think it is getting a bit better now, but still far away from how deep that business model is about. And once you actually trust the people, trust the vision, I think it's also about how do you come and fit into this digital native type of organization that we are at ZhongAn. And the funny story about me was that I've never been any form of sales person at all, right? I'm funny to say that I've been in insurance for 3 generations, so I know very well challenges, the operating model, the complexity of the industry. But I've made my boss, so our CEO, saw in me someone that could actually succeed because of passion, because of the relationship, the depth of the understanding of the complexity of the model and where digital fits. And there are a lot of people that have that in mind. They have the intuition. They know where the industry should be heading, how to transform it. And I believe this is when you have that sort of the grit, right? The passion. You want to do something. You want to have an impact. This is how it's actually the right moment where the conversation about people can start.
Yeah, there's a good client of mine, and one of his acid tests of asking people is is to ask people what they're frustrated with about the industry. So because I'm quite often working in roles where they're technology-based businesses, and then they're trying to work with me to bring the insurance talent in, and the challenge there is finding those people with those right mindsets. And so it's like, what frustrates you about the industry? What have you tried to do about it? And what's brilliant is when you find the right mix, and there's a sort of technology solution, maybe a SaaS company, InsurTech, that's offering a solution, the passion you get from the right people about, quite often you get this conversation, they're like, this is exactly what the industry needs. This is exactly where it needs to go. And as you say, like, they didn't know, but as soon as they see it, they're like, oh, that's the thing. But the challenge for me is trying to artificially create the situation you found yourself in, because that's the perfect recruitment example. So in my world, if I could get my clients to sort of try and engage with talent 18 months before they need to hire them, like, that's the dream. That's what it is. It's because you've got that trust there, you've built a rapport, they've got sort of where the project's going, you're excited about it already, and then it's just a case of waiting for the right role. The challenge is obviously doing that. For me, it's a lot of kind of like social media. It's a lot of kind of putting the employer brand out there. It's talking about, it's doing things like this. It's important, which gives you it closes that gap. Podcasting is a great example. I remember I'm a massive fan of a podcast about film, and I went bounding up to this guy in the street because I saw him at a film festival. And I suddenly realized this guy doesn't know me, but I just listen to him every week. And honestly, the sort of gap between me thinking I knew him and I know I sound like a lunatic, but I suddenly went, oh, just because, I listen to him every week. But closing that gap's important, because otherwise it's really, really difficult to, particularly when you're getting someone to take like you, a leap of faith. I mean, how did you find that culturally? You're going from this sort of 3 generations of insurance, then you're in this kind of hyper growth scale up business. How did you find that kind of cultural shift?
Well, I'd say this is obviously very, very thriving culture, very demanding, right? Because you're a digital native business. Our company, ZhongAn, is only 3 years old, right? So there is a sense of urgency, because when you are born by successful entrepreneurs, what is the most important is actually time and people. So we spend a lot of time focusing on making sure we bring the right people in. But at the same time, we also want to make sure, there's a very strong, passion about delivering. It is definitely very different than a corporate life, right? And more people think through, am I really going to spend 40 years in the same organization, in the same industry? Could I bring a bigger impact if I was potentially part of these, enablers that ZhongAn is also? I think from me, what that journey really started a couple of years before I got to meet with my boss, Bill. That journey started when I realized the power of digital and data. When I actually started to work on, engagement, digital servicing, distribution, marketing. And when you understand the power of, as an industry, insurance has, and the little value that is being able to be brought back to end users and consumers, you see that there is a tremendous potential to help and accompany the transformation of that industry. Mm-hmm. And in many ways, when you try to do this internally, you have to fight your own internal politics battle. When you bring in an external party, and this is what many of my clients and partners are telling me, mm-hmm. ZhongAn and you, Adrien, have been the biggest change agents we've had to change the mindset of our people through the way you bring value, of course, technology, but it's not enough, right? The know-how, the mindset, the consumer first thinking. They've been telling me you've been able to change complete organization across several markets, from headquarters to regional office to local countries, in just a matter of 1 to 2 years. They said this is astonishing. We've never seen that before for the last 10 years. Mm-hmm. And I think it is what it means, right? When you are external, you can bring inside that from internal point of view, you can't really do or say because of politics sometimes. Mm-hmm. And this is where I'm so happy that the impact I'm having with well-established organizations, helping them to actually go to the next stage in terms of delivering value through digital.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's good to see the ecosystem maturing now as well, and there's much more openness from both technology perspective. But I think what I'm finding interesting is the collaboration now, that people are willing to make those changes. They're willing to kind of listen to the outside partners, because partnership is a much more, and I do think it's the influence of tech, like tech businesses, particularly things like SaaS and ecosystem type environments, have always encouraged the kind of integration of different technologies to other technologies to kind of achieve a bigger goal. And that says something about culture as well, and the influence you have on the parent company. So we're just seeing a maturity, I think, now in the market where there's more openness to kind of not just go, oh, we need that technology to plug in. It's like, what can we borrow from the way that this business operates? And that's fascinating. And we keep saying sort of ecosystem, and I know there's different sort of product suites, as it were, that the business offers. So who are the partners? What sort of partners are we working with? And yeah, I want to sort of dig into geographically and how they come about. But just starting with what sort of partners are you aiming for? Where's your sort of target market?
Yeah, so there's basically two types of partners we work with. One is insurance companies mm-hmm. that basically, have tried many ways to bring in digital, and that have most of the time have very strong limitation because of agency, because of distribution conflict, right? Channel conflict. Yeah. And we've realized that actually working with someone that went through that whole journey, so starting digital and actually bringing, innovative business model, omni type of model, a lot of different business models, really, not just channels, business models. They realized that we could be helping them accelerating the execution of their vision. Mm-hmm. It's always there, right? Like, you're a group CEO, you have to transform, you have to be closer to customers, but it is really about how do you actually make it execute upon it. And this is really where we come in. I would say the different type of companies on usually working with tier one, so leading players in their markets, mm-hmm. already thinking about what's coming up next. This is one type. The other types might also be companies that are maybe strong in one core domestic market and want to grow, want to catch up with some of their competitors, and they don't want to do this the traditional way. And they sometimes think building new operations could be the right way to grow much quicker than onboarding agency and doing it only the pure traditional way. This is the first group. So insurance companies, and we help them, of course, with technology propositions that are digital native, some of them being SaaS propositions. And we help them connect the dot also with distribution partners. And this is where Softbank in particular kicks in, right? Because Softbank, as you said, not always investment that make a big return, but actually when you look, the one we don't talk about make a massive return, right? Really like, completely successful. What we do with them is actually helping the portfolio companies of Softbank moving into monetization strategy, upselling, retention, share of wallet, by bringing financial services and insurance capabilities. So we do this, of course, with a technology-first mindset. But having, we've been born from ecosystem businesses, including retailers and social media. So we know a thing or two of how making these platforms successful. And we believe eventually, if we can bring platform businesses working with insurers that have the right capabilities, this is something, achieving a bit our dream, right? About, making an impact in the industry, moving the needle.
Yeah. No, I get that. It's exciting. So I wanted to touch on this. So obviously, embedded solutions has been sort of hot topic of the last couple of years, probably not going away anytime soon, obviously as well. So I just wanted to get a picture of how much of an impact do you think COVID and the sort of pandemics had to play in those solutions, because it would seem as a bit of a shot in the arm for those things.
So I'd say I have mixed perception about the impact of COVID. So I think on one hand, if you look at the consumer lens, it has definitely accelerated the adoption, especially in markets that were very cash reliant, physical interactions reliant. Definitely it helps to move a lot of the processes, a lot of the activities online, right? And you look at e-commerce, for instance, there's been a massive uptake on insurance activity. But when you look at markets that were already very mature, you've seen that actually some of the digital business models, you think about mobility, for instance, you think about travel, have also been not necessarily well during these times, right? Because of course, people commuting, traveling, enjoying less lifestyle, of course, means they've actually been using less this type of businesses. If you look at insurance, particularly, I think it has been a very huge shock that actually the industry was just so reliant on purely the sales agent, the broker, the physical way to interact with clients. And I know in some markets, there's been a huge drop in the actual activity, APE and new business that you were able to be signing up. I think on that, it has had challenge about making sure you hit your EPS earnings target in the year, but at the same time, it also been made a trigger that digital is not just for the hype for an investor. If you don't really deliver these businesses, there is going to be a lot of challenges. Not being able to cope with cases like COVID is one. But another one is also, I think, very fascinating thanks to COVID, right? There's been so much of an inflow of investment coming into innovators, disruptors everywhere, that actually what we see happening in neobanks, digital banks, disrupting the banks, is also going to happen on insurance side, right? And I believe this is ultimately why COVID is going to be an accelerator of transformation, not just because of consumer changing behaviors, but also because new entrants and disruption being much more tangible now to established companies.
Yeah, it's interesting how much the culture. Sorry.
My personal views only on the
no, of course, no. I think it's interesting how the culture has driven those things. So, as you say, like the demand from the consumer for digital first services has gone up. But obviously, that demand from the consumer for certain insurances has gone dramatically down. But we obviously know that's going to return. But then culturally, even just thinking on the kind of practical terms, now it would be, I can't, I've been doing this for 16 years. I can't imagine a time when I've placed more than one person in a remote role And now, obviously, for 2 years, all I've been doing is placing people into remote roles. So what does that say about the structure of these businesses? These businesses that were like, oh no, we have to be in the office together. And even the sort of spin-off. So we've looked at that from a kind of selfish, we save money on offices. I think what's been nice as well, there's been a sort of bit of a reimagining of going, well, why is it important to go to the office? And there's been a conversation about, well, it is still important because people like spending time with people. Like that's actually something people have gone, oh, I want to go into the office. Why? Oh, because I like people. So I want to see some people. So I think we sometimes kind of, we just focus on the things that kind of are efficient and effective, and actually efficient and effective means happy staff as well. So that's been interesting. Something I forgot to ask you about partnerships. I'm always interested when people work with partners, and I skipped over this and I forgot to do it, because the situation you're in, you talked about some of those partners really sort of buying into the way that the methodology, but also the way that you operate, and that's changed their businesses. What makes a good partner for you? What can someone do that kind of wants to kind of work with you to make themselves a good partner? What practical steps can they take?
Yeah, so it's clearly, I mean, there's no a silver bullet on being successful in digital, right? And I think what's the biggest learning is, how can you build an organization that is agile enough so that you can actually test propositions, iterate proposition, check what the customer like, and constantly evolve the model, evolve, the whole way you interact, the whole way you build a product, and all that goes together with this. And to us, the best possible partner is a company that have tried a lot and failed a lot, and that knows exactly where the vision should be bringing them, but haven't been able to deliver on it. This is where, in my view, the best partnership can be delivered, because if the leadership knows, yes, this is where we want to go, we have the resilience to do this, but we need to find the right ways and the right partners to do this. This is where, when we come in, we actually bring them the capabilities. What maybe, the Lego block that they were missing to deliver. Oh yeah, we've tried this 20 times and it never worked. And say, yes, we believe this might be the way it will work. And then they figure out, and then they realize, actually, yeah, working with companies that know this for many, many years of experience makes a huge difference, right? It's not about just technology. It's not about just pure distribution channel. It's also about the know-how. And in many ways, all the partners we're working with today all reach that stage to say, well, I'm really frustrated because I don't get the results I was hoping for. That's why I'm knocking on your door, Zartec. I want to know whether you could help me. Usually this is how a good conversation starts for us, because they usually, became advocates for us very, very rapidly.
That's fascinating. I was thinking it's a bit of an analogy while we're going along. It's like, you can always work with those employees that get up every day and work hard, but they're just not getting it. You can always tweak them and point them in the direction. You can't help those people that don't want to try and give up. It's like sport. The person that kind of actually just turns up every day and does the work. They might not be the most talented, but you can get them there. So yeah, that's fascinating, because most of that's about mindset. It's like they're all capable of doing it. It's just where the mindset's right. We mentioned regulation and we glassed over it, but I think it's really important to talk about, because you're such a global organization, operating at scale, operating in regulated industries. Key factor really is the sort of regulation and security of information, who owns the information, etc. I think that's a deep dive into a really difficult conversation, but I wanted to sort of ask about regulation as a driver for innovation. Because I've just got this belief that restrictions sometimes kind of play into sort of innovation. I think they sort of are a bed for innovation. Have you seen that? And how do you tackle that from kind of regulation from the global perspective?
So in many ways, actually, we need regulation that gives a clear direction. What's challenging is where regulation isn't clear, right? What are you allowed to do, or what are you not allowed to do, right? So as long as the regulation is well elaborated.
Yeah.
It basically allows to have a level playing field, right? So what am I able to do when I interact with customers, when I service them, when I distribute something, when I obtain consent? For us as a company, as a technology B2B company, we have a number of challenges, but we think we are extremely well positioned to be able to have all of our partners beyond complying to their regulation, because we come from an insurance group. So we know what it means to grow a business in a regulated environment and do this because of the others. And regulation is not a blocker. That's actually the opposite, right? If it is digital business model, you know that you can actually be much quicker, much faster, much more efficient. And usually regulators like it, right? Because in the end, it's more value for the citizens, the consumers. The second thing I want to add is we were incubated by two giants, right? So China-born company. I know it's not a good press these days, but I think it also gives us such a huge self-awareness that if we want to qualify operating in markets including Europe, we have to be 500% more compliant than any of the competitor, any of the tech companies, right? Second point, Softbank, right? When you are the largest VC PE fund in the world, it also comes with a number of stringent rules that you have to abide by if you want to be, receiving the investment and the support of an investor. And I believe with that in mind, we take regulation extremely seriously in the way we operate with all our partners. I believe actually what we do is probably best in class in terms of protecting consumers' interests, GDPR, tokenization, and some of these information security related words.
Yeah. No, I think that's an important point about clarity. But you touched on it there. I do think probably unfairly you've got a higher bar of there might be a higher bar for your business than others, and so I think it's an important factor to know. But then it's interesting because it becomes a selling point. It becomes that selling point, because, like you say, you have to be 500% more on the point. Customers, the last thing I want to kind of focus on, which is almost the opposite of the point of my next question, which is
right.
The customers. We should have started with the customer.
Right.
How do we keep the customer at the center? Because we love to run away with the technology. We love to talk about insurance. A conversation I had quite recently was about sometimes we live in this world of insurance and we forget that the end consumer isn't knowledgeable about insurance, doesn't know about it. And then I think we can do the same with technology. We've got all this great technology and we can get obsessed with using it, but we forget about the usability. So how do you keep that customer at the center when you're sort of creating technology solutions?
Well, we touched at the beginning about the business model of ZhongAn being the AWS of Amazon. But actually, there's a second parallel with Amazon for us, which is basically that we were born from e-retailer culture. People coming from an industry that was far more mature than even just social media. E-commerce back in the days was just absolutely ahead on the way to think customer first and designing the entire processes, the value chain, the offering, the pricing, the delivery, and everything around the customer. And I believe it's been the same for us. So we've been almost happened to be in insurance by accident.
Yeah.
And became actually extremely good at it because we started from the thinking that, it's all about the customer. The actual product proposition doesn't really matter. What matters is what we fulfill needs. We fulfill, and in insurance, we talk about protection, right? Protection gap is a buzzword, but actually who's trying to make it and bridge that protection gap in different way, leveraging digital. And I think these are the things that when you really focused about doing this, as if you were a Amazon, I think you learn a thing or two about how to actually create engagement, proposition, services, retention, upsell, that eventually customers just want to come back to you. If I take another example, when colleagues here built this digital bank in Hong Kong, ZA Bank, I've been joining them for some of these workshops. We actually did co-create the bank together with, the pioneers, the one that really wanted to actually build a bank together and be joining with, okay, we will do this evening ideation, 90 minutes, we do workshop, we do small groups. What do you think a bank should be doing for you? Listing down ideas, prioritizing, testing ideas, iterating propositions until we were able to launch that bank. And it's just a way that, consumer groups and everything has been around for a long time, but fundamentally the industry still revolves a lot about distribution and products. And customers always come third. And in a business model like us, we put things upside down, right? It's customer first, then channels, and then products.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think the banking thing, as you were saying that, I suddenly had a flashback that I haven't paid for my bank account for a long, in terms of monthly payment for a bank account. And the reason I stopped doing it was I had all these insurance. The reason I took it is because I think I had mobile and travel and various insurances. And then I just thought how antiquated that feels now, because it's not built for me. It's not bespoke for me. And the technology is there that it obviously could be. It wouldn't be a challenge to do that. But the parallel I always draw, and again, it's the lazy one with Amazon. I would have laughed if you'd have said like 5 years ago that I'd pay, what is it, 70, 80 pounds a year just for delivery and these additional services from a retailer. But almost everyone I know pays that to Amazon. Everyone I know does that. And you think, that plays into things like banking. It's just because they've got the proposition so right. And I think it's, but retail, as you say, it's been streets ahead in terms of personalization and personalized experience, particularly digital first, because even down to how they advertise to you. And it's fascinating to me having a kind of ringside seat watching insurance kind of try and do the same thing. So well, look, I'm really conscious of our time. We don't want to overstay our welcome, but I wanted to kind of just ask you, and I like to always end on this, towards the end of the year, we're going into 2022. What should we look out for from you guys? What's happening in the next year? What's on the slate?
Yeah, so there's a lot going on, right? A 3-year whole business obviously have a lot of plans. As we mentioned, late 2021, we actually raised a fairly large Series A, which was a $230 million USD, which I think is on record one of the largest Series A for InsurTech business.
It's pretty chunky for a Series A, yeah.
Exactly. I think it just speaks about the ambition we have. It just speaks about our belief and our investor belief in the scalability of the business model. And for us, clearly, this year is all about entering new markets, supporting more and more partners with a very scalable proposition. It is about onboarding the new talents that will join us and continue to grow and evolve our proposition. And it's doing it about, of course, the core market where we operate, which is Asia Pacific, but also nowadays in Europe, actually, where we have already our first partners. We haven't communicated about them, but we are already up and running in Europe, and who knows about also entering new geographies. So awesome. Very busy year ahead, very exciting as well.
Exciting stuff. Well, Adrien, you've been very kind with your time. I really appreciate you being a guest. And yeah, I'm fascinated to see what you do, and especially with that amount of firepower with that Series A raise, and that's something to go at the market with. So thank you once again for being a guest. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure, Alex. It's been a pleasure. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.